Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. Well, as much as it drives Fuzzybutts all over this place, absolutely crazy when they hear me say it. I am the host of this show, Luke Robinson, your big dog, and we're glad to have a healthy and happy Ginger Morgan back with us this week. She's the executive director of the Puppy Up Foundation. She's our co-host and our co-producer. Ginger, how are you?
I'm doing well. Like I said the other day, I'm really glad to be back, and my voice is pretty much back, although it sounds kind of funky to me today. But I'm really excited about some of the upcoming puppy up walks we have in the next couple of months, and in the fall. I'll keep everybody updated on those, and I'm looking forward to our guest today.
Well, why don't at the end of the program, why don't you just mention the locations and the dates then for our and where they can find out more for our guests. But let's do that at the end of the show because I want to jump right into our guest this week. It's exciting. I'm excited about it, Ginger, because it's right up my alley, my fuzzy butt alley, as it were. We've got Jan Dohner here. She's here. She's spent really a decades, an entire lifetime on livestock guardians, livestock fuzzy butts. I don't know all the other different things to say, but I went to your website, Jan, and you're an expert on a whole lot of things. So welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends, Jan.
Oh, thank you. Sounds like fun.
Great. Well, we like to start this show with an intro to the Fuzzybutts, since we are Fuzzybutts and Friends. So I'm guessing you live on a farm and you probably have a lot. So why don't you tell us about a few of your Fuzzybutts?
Well, I come from a family of dog lovers. Way back, I've owned dogs all my life. My grandparents were farmers, and so they tended to have sort of like multi-purpose, farm type dogs around, but then they also had soft spots in their hearts for little ones like Boston Terriers and all kinds of things. So I came by this very, very naturally. When my dad got home from World War II, we moved into my grandmother's chicken coop because there was a shortage of housing. My mother will swear today that they cleaned it out very carefully first, but I felt like it probably imprinted me, right? With my whole life to come, right? My husband and I live in Michigan on a small farm, and we've been here more than 40 years. And we raise sheep and goats. We've had horses in the past. We don't anymore. Dogs, of course, chickens. A cat. There's a very ancient cat wandering around too. It's just our animals are our life. They really are. It's what we do. And everything I've written about in the last 30 years has been sort of sprung out of our farm and the animals that we have. And all these topics I've written about are interrelated. All these things are interrelated. How we live with our animals, how we have animal partners as workers and companions that we work with and stuff, and also the need to preserve them and preserve their valuable characteristics and inform people about what they're really like, so people make good decisions about bringing an animal, in my case, mostly dogs, into their life or their farm, because I want people to have like a long, happy life with their dog, right? I don't want any surprises that don't work out. So much of my writing about livestock guardian dogs has been to try to educate and prepare people for using dogs like this. And then it sort of expanded into working farm breeds because they're very popular. People love them, but they bring along with them a lot of characteristics, and people need to be prepared to make their animal happy and also to have a long life together. So everything is interrelated that I do.
It is. I like how you say that. We talk about companion animals and the value of companion animals to society a lot on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And you just can't have one without the other. And historically, we just haven't done a really good job. I think the human race is as valuing them or incorporating them. And I think even educating ourselves and learning more about them. So Jana, I really love the fact that you not only have been a farm girl all your life. I'm from Texas. We have lots of farms down there in Texas. I didn't grow up in one, and I certainly didn't grow up in a chicken coop. But a lot of my kinfolk they did, and so you spent a lifetime not only on a farm but learning about it and learning about that ecosphere and how it applies to really the global ecosphere as well. Well, we have lots to talk about, Jan. That's a great origin story, as we call it. Let's start off with the basics, kind of where you began. You began with sheep and livestock. let's talk about livestock guardians. What does that encompass, all of the breeds?
Right. Well, we got the animals first, like many people, right? And we were raising historic breeds of chickens, and I was battling predators, right? I mean, no matter where you live in the country, there are predators that you need to learn to coexist with, right? And I remembered my favorite National Geographic book of dogs that I had read as a child, and my image was, I need a livestock guardian dog. I need that big white Great Pyrenees that protects the animals on the farm. And that's literally where it began. We went and bought a Great Pyrenees puppy and brought it home. And this was in the late 70s, early 80s. And the use of livestock guardian dogs was pretty new to people in the United States and Canada then. This was very much an old world sort of European thing. This was not the tradition that many of the British colonists brought with them to the United States. And so we just didn't have that kind of relationship where, we had these stories, right? The Great Pyrenees was in the mountains protecting the sheep, but nobody really did that until about the 70s and 80s here in the United States. And it was because predators were making a comeback. People were having to find ways to coexist with them, and they were sort of reached back to this old world tool. And when we first brought this over, we didn't know how this all worked, right? We didn't know the right way that you raised a puppy and sort of trained it to be a good, reliable livestock guardian. And we've learned a lot since then, and some of it through trial and error. There are a lot of misapprehensions out there, misconceptions about how livestock guardian dogs work. But and we've also had to adapt them to our life here. Our life here is different. Most of these dogs grew up with shepherds. They were developed over thousands of years with shepherds who lived on big, wide open spaces, right? They were out, on the range, up in the mountains, things like that. That's not how most of us live here. Some people in large areas, Texas, parts of the West, do have really large grazing areas, but most of us are living on smaller farms. So we've kind of had to adapt and make livestock guardians our own. Now, they come like fully equipped to do their job. They have a lot of inherited traits and behaviors and instinctive reactions, which are all great things for being a livestock guardian, but they can be a challenge for the people that own them. If they can be a challenge.
Joke.
I love them. And many livestock guardian dog people appreciate all these things about them, but they are very large, very independent minded, not likely to listen to your commands. They think for themselves. They're instinctively defensive of their people, their animals, right? You're smiling because these are all things your dogs
I'm checking boxes. I'm checking boxes. I'm on my 5th Great Pyrenees right now, and I'm just, yep, that's true. Yep. They do that. Yep.
They bark a lot because they're barking to warn away predators. They could drive your neighbors crazy. They have a tendency to want to roam because they want to go out and patrol and protect a bigger area than maybe you have right there at your farm or your home. So there was a need for all of us to learn how to, deal with these dogs, train these dogs, select these dogs. And we didn't have much to choose from, right? I mean, we had Great Pyrenees. There were a few other breeds that were sort of show dogs, like the Cuvas or Commodore or something. But mostly we've had to bring these breeds over to North America in the last 20 or 30 years. And there's a lot of them now.
Yes, this is just such a fascinating story. I thought you started with Pyrenees just because you knew I have Pyrenees,
no,
Pyrenees guys. But it fascinates me because I'm learning about history that I didn't know about. I knew that Pyrenees are thousands and thousands of years old. They're actually one of the oldest breeds known that are still extant, to the best of our knowledge. Some people say they think they date back to the BCs, which is incredible. And one of the things that I love about the breed so much, Jan, is that when you spend an inordinate amount of time with the Pyrenees, as I have, and mostly intense, and observing them, you see the ancient wisdom. You see that the independence, because, like you said, it's like they come pre-programmed with what to do. They know what to do, and I always joke. They looked at me as like, yeah, well, I don't really need you, Dad. Just give me breakfast, give me dinner. tummy rubs, occasionally bait me when I get really stinky. Actually, Pyrenees really don't, their fur is such that they don't really need baths. It's amazing. But I think it's fascinating that in the 70s that that they really weren't here. There was a very small population, and that was the only breed. So they brought, so really they imported Pyrenees to America for the sole specific purpose of guarding livestock, because there weren't any other breeds that were currently being used for that here at that time. Is that right?
Yeah, and there were a few Pyrenees here. They were show dogs, maybe companion dogs, but they weren't being bred to do that. And since then, we have imported, thousands of dogs from Europe, from a variety of places. Spain, like the Spanish Mastiff; from Italy, the Maremma is a very popular dog here, very much like the Pyrenees. The ancient Romans would recognize your dog. They wrote about these big white sheep guardian dogs in the Pyrenees and in the Alps. And I mean, they would recognize them in what they did. We brought over a lot of dogs from Turkey, curiously enough, like the Anatolian Shepherd and the Kongo and the Akbash, because they were a shorter haired dog. And for many of our situations in the United States, it was better to have a dog that's maybe a little shorter haired than a Pyrenees, or because most of the livestock guardian dogs have longer coats because they're equipped to live outside 24/7. No matter where, right? But the Turkish breeds have been popular, but they're coming from all over now. And they each bring something a little bit different, because the shepherds in that region had specific needs, right? Maybe different kinds of livestock, cattle instead, or goats, or sheep, or maybe they interacted with them differently. They lived and worked with them all the time. And so they're a little more attuned to living with people. Great Pyrenees are a little bit more attuned to living with people than some of the other livestock breeds. And I always tell people they're a great breed to begin with. They're a great starter livestock guardian breed because they are a little bit more forgiving of your mistakes. I think our mistakes.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say they were a great starter dog, and I was going to say
no.
Starter, no.
They're a great starter livestock guardian.
Yeah. I just want to clarify. I don't even call mine Great Pyrenees anymore, because I call them ungrateful Pyrenees, because they don't respect the poppy. They don't because they're so independent. It's just it's almost, but I am too, and I find that very fascinating. I'm very independent and stubborn-minded and determined. And I find it fascinating that people think that there's a similarity between people that remind them of themselves, and that's certainly true with Pyrenees. Would you say then? So we know that we have a lot of different other breeds to come in here over the states now to protect livestock. But would you say, is it accurate to say that Pyrenees still are the number one livestock guard dog?
I would say they're number one, Pyrenees and Pyrenees crosses, because they've been crossbred with other livestock guardian dogs, sometimes just out of, they're on the same farm or ranch, and that happens. I think probably the Anatolian Shepherd from Turkey is the second most popular, because they have been very successful out west, and particularly the Turkish breeds. And in Texas, where you are as well, you'll probably see a lot of Anatolians and Akbash and Congos, because they're suited to that hotter sort of temperature, and stuff too. So they've been a good mix. But yeah, Pyrenees are probably still the number one dog.
It interests me though, Jan, that I take my Pyrenees and travel all around the country, not always by foot, to do events and so on and so forth. And it never fails. I'll meet somebody and say, "Boy, they're just marvelous herding dogs," and I never correct them, because I wasn't. My mom told me not to do that, and I just shake my head unless it's germane to the conversation, unless we continue to talk about it, of course. But it's like no, they don't herd. They're the lazy ones. They sit around and cut up and have fun until obviously there's a threat, and then they're all business. So I wanted to get that out there. I'm sure you've encountered that.
Oh, absolutely. I would say livestock guardian dogs do not herd. It's confusing though, for good reason. A lot of them have the name sheepdog or shepherd in their name, and yet they're not really a herding dog. Herding dogs came along much later. the livestock guardians were among the first types of breeds in the ancient world, along with hunting dogs, you know, and a few others. But herding dogs came along later when people, especially in Britain, had a need for going out to retrieve sheep, right? Because the sheep economies became so important in Great Britain, and they had eradicated all their large predators. So there was no need for a livestock guardian dog in Britain, and there never has been one used. They're actually even illegal today. They can't be like out in a field unattended, because in Britain you can hike through people's fields, right? There's public right of way for walking and stuff, but they've never had a need for it, you know. They have no predator larger than a fox. So because they eradicated their bears and wolves and things like that a long time ago, they can keep sheep very differently than the way we can keep sheep here. They can literally, I had Shetland sheep and they're just out all year, right? And then once or twice a year, the shepherds go out with their herding dogs and bring them back, and nobody has to protect them. So it's understandable that people are confused, but herding dogs have very different temperaments than livestock guardians.
We'll get to them later. I want to stay on Pyrenees.
Okay.
In fact, we're going to make this all about Pyrenees. Screw the herding dogs. Who cares about those? I love them. I've actually seen herding dogs in action at some exhibitions, at some events, and it's just fascinating what they do and how effective they are. Pyrenees, one of the things that I've heard, Jan, and since you've spent so much time with them, I really want to kind of drill down their temperament. The Pyrenees and other guardian dogs as well. I would imagine they share a similar temperament. One of the things that I get is that it was interesting that you said that Pyrenees, they're better with humans. I've backpacked thousands of miles, so I've actually talked to farmers. I've actually tented out on farmland where they've had Pyrenees and so on. I've had some really in-depth conversations. And it fascinates me. Every one of them have said, without exception, that they were losing livestock every year. They got a Pyrenees, and boom, it was like zero. They didn't lose any anymore. It was they just couldn't speak highly enough about them. But I met a few farmers that said they were so effective, I decided to get a second Pyrenees, and then I started losing livestock. And then I had to figure out why. And he would go to the field, and the two Pyrenees were playing like knuckleheads. And so that's the first question. And the second question I have for you about the Pyrenees personality is that if you want a Pyrenees to grow to protect your livestock, you have to introduce them like right early on, right when they're born or very near that. And then they have to stay with the livestock, and their interaction with people, you keep to a minimal. And it's a different personality. So speak to those two sort of myths or things I've heard about.
Right. First of all, about raising them. It was kind of a myth that you should raise them hands off. They worked with their shepherds. They lived with their shepherds. They were out all day with their shepherds. So they want a relationship with a person just like any other kind of dog, except on their own terms, right? Just like you, I call my dog, she comes up, I give her a little pet, maybe a little treat, and then she said, yeah, well, goodbye, I got things to do. And then they just leave, right? Because they do, she's got stuff to do. So it's true that it's better and more likely if your puppies can be born in or raised around livestock, right? It's because it's a form of bonding and imprinting on them, and the smells of a barnyard and sheep, if that's what they're going to guard eventually and stuff. That's all very true. But they still need some supervision by you. The shepherd still supervise the puppy, or an older experienced livestock guard dog would act like a mentor and correct bad puppy behavior, right? So they still need your human interaction. They also still need to learn all the basic manners of life. They're going to have to go to the vet. They're going to have to get in your car. They're going to have their toenails trimmed. I mean, you need to handle them and stuff. I will say there are people who really believe that you should keep to a minimum, like bringing them in the house and stuff like that. If you really do want a livestock guardian that will be outside with your stock 24/7, you know, that you will go out and interact with where in their working space, you know, because you can easily confuse them about, I would rather be up at the house. On the other hand, some people very deliberately raise a livestock guardian to do both jobs, sort of. They're more of a general purpose farm guardian than a farm and family sort of guardian. They're out patrolling around things during the day and stuff, but they're sort of free to come in the house and be with you as well. So people have to decide what role they want for their dog and then sort of be consistent about how they handle it. And I do think it's good if the breeder is, if not raising the puppies on a farm, is at least paying attention to selecting dogs to breed that carry those good traits, that are nurturing towards baby animals, right? Or who have all those same kind of traits. That puppy's going to do fine coming home to your house on a farm. Mine did. She wasn't raised on a farm, you know, or born on a farm. So I've done a lot of webinars, which are available for free on my website, about how you select a livestock guardian puppy, how you train it, how you problem solve some of these adolescent problems they have later. Because it sounds like your other situation is sort of this adolescent problem that some people run into when they're working with livestock guard dogs. I will say, I always am against somebody getting two puppies at the same time and trying to train, put them out with livestock and expect them to work together, because they will tend to focus on each other more. And it can develop into those sibling kind of dependency problems that people with companion dogs sometimes see, where you can't separate them, right? Or stuff like that. I always advocate for having an older dog. And then when that dog is mature, 4 or 5 years old, get a puppy. The older dog will help raise the puppy. And I've watched it happen, right? Like, nope, we don't do that, right? Kind of stuff. And that way you're also sort of staggering the ages of your working dogs so that you won't end up with 2 old dogs at the same time and nobody out there to protect the sheep, right? So I like the staggering thing, and it avoids that, you know, playing together thing, like you mentioned, you know, where they can get too fixated on each other. But livestock guardians can work in groups, and they do. But you've got to pay some attention to the dynamics of them and their temperaments. You can't put 2 very dominant dogs out together. It'd be better to get a more dominant and a more submissive dog. Opposite sexes work better, you know. 2 neutered males work really well, you know. Things like that are guidelines for sort of helping you do that.
Yeah, is it that's fascinating information. Mine, unfortunately, my Pyrenees, they just don't work at all. The only work they do on a daily basis is work on my nerves and what they can get out of me. But you know, I'm kidding, of course, because all dogs need to be worked. I believe that you should have a working relationship, you should have a fun relationship, and then you should have a loving relationship with your companion animal, with your mate, your fuzzy butt, for sure. But what I find interesting, Jan, and because I've traveled and I've been in so many different situations, and what I think that very few people who only have 1 dog or maybe 1 or 2 dogs in a household setting their entire lifetime, what I find fascinating is dogs, they can create complex social groups. And they have much more complex hierarchies than what we think. There's alpha, then there's the omega, and all the it's much more complex that. And I see that particularly true with Pyrenees. And it's interesting that you mentioned how they can work in bigger groups because they have to, right? You might have 5 or 6 out there on the farm tending to the flock, and they just have to have their own separate jobs. They have to know what to do, and they have to know how to get along and work with the other ones.
Yeah, and some of them will tend to take on roles like you're talking about. Some of them will sort of, you know, take on, like, I'm going to be the person that goes out and patrols around the fences, the dog that's like, you know, doing that kind of thing. And others will say, I'm the one that's sort of staying back, taking care of the ewes with the baby lambs. I mean, I have friends who see this all the time. The dogs will assume different roles. And when a threat comes as well, you'll see some dogs confront it and some go with the animals and retreat to maybe safety. You know, you do see these things where they're putting themselves between the threat and their livestock, right? Or something. It's fascinating to see them work all this stuff out, right? And understand what needs to be done almost on a pack basis for approaching a threat or something like that. Yeah.
Well, they approach threat analysis, I would imagine, fairly similar to what people do or people should. Nature gave us, designed us that instinct to be able to do threat analysis. Here's another interesting question I have for you, Jam. Is it ever is it ever to, as a Pyrenees or a livestock guardian dog, ever too old that okay, they've passed the point now, it makes no sense to put them in a livestock situation because they're never going to take to them at all? Is that true?
It's possible that there are failures, yes, of dogs that just don't, but we see that in dogs that take on all kinds of roles. Some dogs don't make it through service dog training or seeing eye training or anything, right? You know, some dogs are goofuses, right? And it just doesn't work out, right?
I have a whole house full of goofuses.
Goofballs, exactly. And I was going to say, it's funny you were talking about they sort of self-identified their own jobs, like, I'm going to take care of the little lambs over here. I'm going to do this. If Hudson, we put him out there, he's like, my job, I'm going to be beautiful. That's my job. He was the sweetest boy I ever met, but you put him on a working farm, and which, interesting enough, I rescued him from a farm in Waco. But the owners had him in a trap of some sort in a small cage. It was a sad situation, but he was such a beautiful kid. But Ginger, am I wrong? Would you ever see him?
Oh no, he would go lay out in the middle of the field and go,
look at me,
look at me. I am going to scare them away with my beauty. Yeah. The only time I ever saw him have any type of Pyrenees trait was I took him to my niece's house. So it was a new backyard for him, and he didn't have anybody else to patrol the yard. I had never seen him patrol my backyard at all. And so my niece, there were cows and things, a big field of cows behind her house, and her yard is long and then it kind of goes down a hill. Well, it's dark and I don't see Hudson. I mean, how do you miss this big white fluffy dog? Like, where is he? So I walked out on the deck and I could see he was paroling the perimeter. That was the only time I saw him do that. It was like, wow, I guess he didn't have anybody else to help him do that. So he was like, oh, I guess it's left to the beautiful one to check this out. I mean, he was something.
I think he did that just because it was you, because he looked at me, he's like, Papa, you got to go outside and check and make sure everything's okay before we go to sleep. Hudson was so unique. He was a Pyrenees, but he was not. But he would have totally been a fail, what you call a fail. And I like how you say that, is that you can't have we had I can't recall the name of canine companions on, and they train they do a wonderful job of training our canine companions to help special needs and people with special situations. And then she was saying that some of them fail out as well. That just speaks to you're gonna have that yes. Dogs are much more complex than what I think we give them to. Is we have the expectation that a breed is one size fits all, and that's just not the case.
But on the other hand, we've seen rescue livestock guardians who have never been on a farm be brought to a farm and finally have a job to do. I mean, some dogs are just so much happier with having more space, having something to look at all day and keep an eye on. And you know what I mean? Rather than if they had been in some kind of situation maybe where they were confined to a small backyard in a suburb and they were barking and driving the neighbors crazy and everything else. And I've seen people bring them out years into their life and they're like, oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting on my travels. Whenever I take near a farm, walking to a farm, walking by a farm, or I go to a farm for some type of an event, without exception, every single one of my Pyrenees, and I'm on number 5 now, it's fascinating to watch them because you see almost like this instinct kick in. They go, I'm here. I smell these smells. I should be doing something. I need to be doing something. And I always felt bad, Jan, because I always felt, God, I really just need to get a farm, because you see that and you see that yearning. In Indiana, remember Indiana on the West Coast? I walked the entire length of the West Coast with Indiana, and I can't tell you how many horse farms that we passed by. And it was awesome because we had to go up and down mountains on the West Coast. And every time there was a farm on the top of the hill, Indiana would smell the farm and he would just go nuts. He would get excited. He just loved the smell and wanted to be there. So I do feel like maybe, and I know that we have a problem now in this country that we have far too many. The South is a net exporter of Pyrenees because you have far too many Pyrenees down on the farms.
Yeah.
The farmers tried to breed them, and then you understand the problem. But I just almost feel like maybe Pyrenees that should actually kind of be on the farm, because it's almost like, I wouldn't say abuse, but it's almost like, wow, you're denying them sort of their native environment.
And I think that's true for lots of dogs we take into our homes as companions, right? People love border collies for their intelligence and everything else, but then you have to be prepared for, like, what kind of outlet am I going to provide for them, for their energy and their interest, and all these other things. So I guess I have seen very good homes like yours you're talking about, who have kept a livestock guardian dog as a family companion dog, but they're prepared and knowledgeable, and they're also willing to make the sacrifices that you need to make to keep a dog happy. So you've got to think about, how am I going to house this dog in a secure fence when I can't supervise him, or how am I going to do the things to protect him in the long run as well. So it's just a matter to me of education, right? If you understand and you're prepared. I know somebody right now who has a Congo dog in Washington, D.C., in a row house, and this dog has existed happily there for years because the owners are very knowledgeable, provide for the dog's needs too, so that it has an outlet, right, and lots of the exercise it needs and stuff, but they're prepared. And I guess that's always my biggest message. I wish that all puppy owner people, doesn't matter kind of breed, just understand what this dog is going to need. And if it's not a good fit for you and your lifestyle, and you're not prepared to do activities with it to keep its mind engaged, or whatever else it needs, companionship, it's not the right fit.
Yeah, I can't tell you the number of people. I'm sure Ginger, she ran the Humane Society for 4 years, and she probably saw a lot more than I have, but I can't tell you how many people I find. And they said, I had a Pyrenees once in an apartment. I just didn't know they got that big. And I'm like, you don't have the internet? You didn't do any research? Or you have the one that I see most often is that you have like the Australian Shepherds that have so much energy, and the owner's like, I don't have the bandwidth on a daily basis to go out and exercise and work with them. And so they destroy the house, and it becomes a nightmare. So you do kind of see, not only do you have to know the breed, but you have to adapt to the breed and work with their nature, and know how they want to work, and then work with them in that respect, so that they don't work on your nerves all day like mine do. So tell us. Go ahead, Ginger. You have a question?
Like work on your nerves, like Indiana. Sometimes, if he doesn't get what he wants, he just goes, "Oh."
Yeah.
Like, what do you want, Indy?
Yeah, but another thing also too, Ginger, is also, and here's a great example of that, Jan, is that my Pyrenees, I think probably without exception, Hudson maybe the least of it, resource guarded, and that's their nature coming back in a household restricted environment. And I'm sure that can cause problems, because some of my Pyrenees have resource guarded Ginger against one of my other Pyrenees, and actually against me, although I find that funny. Is like, I'll come down, they all have to, they don't, anyway, I'll come down like in the middle of the night, and they'll be in the room with somebody, and I will startle them, and they will come, that's their instinct, is to guard or protect whoever is in that room,
right?
If it's not me. But that's an example of, you've now taken their instinct and nature and confined it into a very small environment.
And resource guarding is common in all livestock guard dog breeds.
I thought it was, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And it's common even in working dogs, because people say they're fighting over their food, and people write me and I say, then feed them in two different places.
Right, exactly. Right, that's what I do.
This is how they're, they're a much more primitive breed in many ways, primitive type of dog. And this comes with them. This is just one of the things that comes with them. And just be prepared for it. Find a way that you're going to adapt to that.
And living here in Memphis, somebody was asking me, like, are you afraid somebody's going to break into your house? There's a lot of crime everywhere now, but it's rising here in Memphis. They said, are you afraid somebody's going to break into your house and do something? I said, well, before they get to me, they have to go to through three Great Pyrenees. So if they make it through there, then I'm prepared to take care of myself once they get to me. So
yeah, they're very effective at that, and it's intimidating. You see a side of the Pyrenees that you rarely see, and it's awesome that they retain that instinct. Jan, are there any talk to us about the livestock that the guardian dogs protect? The whole range. Is there some type of livestock that Pyrenees just absolutely refuse to protect? Like, screw those mules, they're too grumpy. So talk to us about the livestock. What do they protect?
The livestock that all livestock guardian dogs mainly guarded throughout history were sheep and goats. Okay. Those were the shepherds. That's what they kept. That's what they migrated between winter pastures, all that kind of stuff. So that is their instinctive livestock. They do well with cattle. And I know a lot of people keeping them with cattle in Spain, especially, and some other countries. The livestock guardian dog shepherds use them with cattle too. So they do fine with cattle. Lots of people here want to use them with poultry, right? Because everybody's got free range chickens now, right? And you want them, and yet everything's out to get a free range chicken. If you know anything about it, hawks, everything, right? And it's delightful if they work, but it's not their instinctual livestock. They don't form an emotional bond with them the way they do with sheep or goats, where they're literally affectionate with, their sheep and goats. So they aren't going to form that bond. And also poultry is just it's kind of like a suicide machine a little bit, right? It's flapping around in front of a puppy, and it's like, doing all kinds of things that excite a puppy. So it takes a long time to get a puppy to calm down, to be a good guardian. They are eventually, many of them, not quite as successfully as they are with other livestock, but they can be. They can be, a good guardian because they're alert to aerial dangers, which is a threat from hawks and stuff. They are a good guardian. And once they sort of leap over adolescence and get calmer, they can be a good poultry guardian, but they don't form that bond. And so people who think, oh, I have chickens, so I've got to go get a Great Pyrenees, that's not going to be as easy as you think, right? They're kept with alpacas a lot because alpacas are too small to protect themselves. Llamas can protect themselves just like donkeys, and they're used as guardian animals somewhat. But even so, I know some llama breeders that have livestock guardian dogs because wolves can be a major threat out west, right? So no, donkeys are a whole nother thing, because donkeys are very independent minded, and I would occasionally have my livestock guardians out with my horses when I had them, but that's not a super comfortable relationship either, because horses are, just like donkeys, are very geared to be protective against canines. You know what I mean? They would protect their own, young against them. So yeah, it's kind of like that.
I wasn't picking on mules or donkeys. I was trying to be funny. I was perfect segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about. Although I could just wrap this show up right now and just say, well, it's a great show about Great Pyrenees. Thank you for your time, everybody. But we do have other things, and I'm curious about that. You mentioned llamas. My first walk from Austin to Boston, we pitched a tent near the San Gabriel River in Texas on a llama farm. And he had, I think, maybe 6 or 7 llamas. And then he raised them to sell them to other farmers to protect their livestock. And they said, and they're used, like you were saying, as a livestock guardian animal. Contrary, but his point was, he educated me. What a wonderful conversation. He said, I first got llamas, I didn't know how dangerous they were, and one of the females was in heat, and he went in there with the group, and the alpha was ornery and ended up taking a talon and eviscerating him, cutting his stomach, and his guts fell out. He has stayed in ICU for a long time. So he was saying, don't go in there where they're at with the llamas, and we of course didn't. But I find that fascinating that that llamas are used for that purpose. What are the other, aside from llamas, what are the other livestock guardian animals that we're seeing out there?
Donkeys. Donkeys are also used because donkeys are highly protective against canines. That, I mean, they also they just react differently than horses. Horses sometimes tend to run from dangers, and donkeys in the wild or in feral conditions turn and face a threat. And so the donkey isn't protecting the sheep because of any love or bonding with the sheep. It's just its instinctive reaction to stop at something and chase it away. And so the United States government adopts out like a lot of burros, right, from that are captured with wild horse, kind of like rehoming things, and that can be a good possibility as something to protect. And I know some people who use them even with livestock guardian dogs too, like maybe on a big open range or something. They are, both llamas and donkeys are not nearly as successful as dogs. The federal government, the Agricultural Service, has been studying for 20 years what are the most effective things for ranchers. And good predator-proof fencing is always the most effective thing. And the second thing is a livestock guardian dog. And llamas and donkeys are quite a bit down there because in the end they are still a prey animal, and they can't defend against a pack of coyotes or a group of wolves or a bear or something else, whereas dogs working together can deal with those things. That's what they have dealt with in the past and stuff, so they're far more successful. I also tell people who are keeping poultry or something, you ought to think about some of the old world traditions where for keeping poultry is like a couple of mean geese work pretty good, or a mean rooster can be helpful. So that's why farmers kept some, often a couple of geese around a farmyard. They're kind of watchdogs. They're very loud. They let people know when somebody new has driven up. They can be intimidating. I don't know if you've ever tangled with a goose, but they're a little scary and
They
stuff. So
can be, yes.
I actually just saw a video. I love watching the all sorts of animal videos online, and there was one with a Canada goose, and he was staring down a couple of bulls, and he would just run straight at him, peck him on the head, and then run back and run at the next one. And the bulls were like, "Hey, why? Okay, we're 50 times bigger than you, but you seem awfully mad." So that's cute.
well,
That's
if you think back how our farming lives were in the past, farmers kept a lot of different animals,
Yeah.
and they raised different crops. Farms were more diverse in what they were doing, not just a single crop or something, right? So all those animals out grazing together, being in a barnyard, are protecting each other in many ways, as that we see with wildlife in Africa, right? Where they'll come together in big conglomerations of different kinds of animals, because that's protective as well. So there's something to be said for allowing that mixed grazing, right, of larger animals with smaller animals as well. So you could do things like that. If a dog is not appropriate for you, and a livestock guardian dog is not appropriate for everyone in every situation. Let's say on your farm you run a bed and breakfast and you have a lot of visitors and people like that. A dog might not be your answer. And I know people who've then got a guardian llama or something else that can maybe be less of a threat, or something they have to manage in the presence of a lot of guests or something. So yeah, there's different
You just have to
solutions.
deal with the llamas spitting at you, though. That was another thing I learned. They spit at you. But alpacas, I love the alpacas. You're right. They're so cute. They're gentle, and they're the nicest things. And I think they're related. Aren't alpacas
they are
related to llamas? And llamas are just like the bigger, older brother bully or something. They spit mean. I love what you said, and I want to go back and just reiterate this briefly. Is that I love how you said fences first,
yes,
then livestock guardian animals second, and because I can't tell you how many farms and farmland I've passed and traveled across. And you look at it, and they have all this livestock, and then they have the guards, and completely open, or they have those open fences which don't do anything. And it's horrible for Pyrenees, because the Pyrenees is going to do, like you said, roam. I'm sure you heard the famous Pyrenees thing. What do you call a Pyrenees off leash gone.
Gone.
And it's just like people don't understand is that these guys have been roaming mountain lands and
Yeah.
farmlands for thousands of years, and humans are never gonna take that instinct out of them. So if you have livestock, fence your property properly.
Yes.
First, get your livestock guardian animals second, as a second line of defense. Because the other thing, and I'm an animal lover, and this is important, I don't want to see any animal get killed. It breaks my heart. I can't watch nature shows when they have the killing going on. I understand the predation. I understand that's how we all survive, and nature made this chaotic world that we all live in. But I can't stand even coyotes being killed, because if you think about it, they just want to eat, right? We all want to eat and survive in this chaotic world that we live in. And so the way to respect the boundaries of nature is having that as many lines of defense to protect yourself and your farm, I won't say property, because that's another bad thing in Texas, is that people refer to their animals and dogs as property, and that's not true. But protect your community, your tribe, your family, and protect the nature outdoors as well. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say that the work I've done with animal predators and livestock guardians is about predator coexistence, because for the most part, we can coexist if we understand how the predator is going to act, what times of year that they're going to be around, what they're looking for, you know what I mean, times of day, everything else. There are a whole list of things you can do to make your animals and your farm safer from predators seasonally too, like looking at knowing that winter they're going to be more desperate for food. You know what I mean? So you need to bring your animals in closer to your barn where you can be around them. I mean, there's just a lot of things you can do that allow you to coexist with nature. We have seen coyotes raise a litter of pups right outside our pasture fence. My sheep are on the one side and the dogs, and the coyotes are on the other side, and we have not lost a sheep, and the dogs haven't killed a coyote, because the dogs set up a territory much like a coyote would or a wolf would or something, and the coyotes know, just don't cross the fence. These guys are on this side. We're all fine. You're all fine over there. This is one reason the dogs bark a lot. They're letting other predators know we're here, right? This is ours. We're setting up our territory that we're protecting. And you can coexist marvelously. I'm not saying there aren't occasional run-ins with problems and stuff, but for the most part, if you're thoughtful about what you're doing and you don't take sort of the easy way out, like you think you can just throw animals out there and they're going to be fine. You don't have to have good fences. You can have 3 strands of barbed wire and that's going to work. That's not going to keep anything out. That's the only thing 3 strands of barbed wire were ever good for is keeping cattle from roaming out of an area. And they're not predator protection. And so you're right. There are things you have to do if you're going to be a responsible farmer and an owner. And that means you will have fewer run-ins with coyotes. There is a strong belief in the coexistence movement that if you never ever shoot a coyote, you will have less problems with them, because the population that establishes itself in your area will understand which places are protected by dogs, and it will stay away from them. But when people think they have to go out and just shoot coyotes, that creates an opening in the ecosystem. New coyotes move in who don't know where these territories sort of exist. And this is something that a lot of us talk about a lot. It's like you can set up patterns of coexistence if you work at it. And I know people farming thousands of acres with cattle and sheep up in Alberta where there are wolves and stuff, and they have never had to shoot anything because they intelligently learned to live with nature where they live. And it's possible. You just need to educate yourself the same way we were talked about with dogs. You need to educate yourself, and you can find out how these things work and what techniques you can use.
Well, we don't even seem to understand as a society how to peacefully coexist with other societies and what we would consider, predators and people that don't have the same belief system or culture that we do. But I've always find it fascinating that every mistake that man makes is when they look away from nature, not into nature, and see how it's done in the natural world. And that's so true and so important. It's so powerful and important that you believe in predator coexistence. I think that's so important because it drives me nuts when people they try to poison off a species, they try to do this and that, and they almost always, and these are environmentalists, these are the experts, the smart people, and they almost always invariably end up screwing something up downstream by making mistakes like
Yeah.
that.
And people have the mistaken impression that if you get livestock guardian dogs, you're getting them to kill predators. And that's not what you're doing. You're getting them to discourage predators from coming on your property. For the most part, after years of having livestock guardian dogs, mostly what they do is threaten. They bark to let the predator know, and they'll make rushes at the fence, or they'll rush at the predator. I mean, they make a series of escalating steps, and 99% of the time, that's all it takes, because the predator will just stop and think, this is not going to be an easy place to visit, right? Its dogs are here. It's mostly about deterrence, and it's not about confrontation.
Yeah, but I love what you said a second ago, that you had a coyote giving birth to pup out there right by your fence. But think about how powerful that is now, that you want that coyote, you want that family of coyotes out there, because we know epigenetics is such a powerful concept in nature, because that next generation, that litter of coyote puppies, they're going to know and understand those boundaries, the boundaries that exist in that ecosystem around there. And you want that native knowledge in there. You want to protect that ecosystem because it's safe and smart for everyone. It's just it's amazing how we don't we seem to not understand how to apply that model large scale when it comes to civilizations, but it's so important. All right, so I don't want to talk all about, still have many other things to talk about, and the show's all been about Great Pyrenees, which is fine with me, but
you're going to have to talk fast.
well, let's get to the herding breeds, because that's also a part of your world as well, and an equally important part. What are the herding breeds?
The herding breeds were developed later than livestock guardians, as I talked about before. And they're just like the polar opposite, right? They're high energy. They are super willing and dependent on you. They want to be in your company all the time. They want to please you. They want to learn everything you want to teach them. We have an English Shepherd, which is a American bred collie, farm collie type of dog. And the minute my husband says, hey, you want to go to the barn, or time to put out the sheep, or anything, there she is. She could have been sound asleep a second ago, but now she is sitting in front of him saying, yes, boss, let's go do that right now. Right? So they're exactly the opposite. And they're super brilliant minds, will get into tons of trouble unless you keep them busy with things to do. But they are an invaluable animal working companion, as we were talking about before. I really believe that, as dogs are our oldest animal companions, they've lived with us the longest. They've evolved and changed with us. We've learned to read them physically and body language, and they read us. And it's an unbelievable relationship. And the chance you have with a dog that you can work with to accomplish a task, and you understand each other, it's an incredible feeling. And that's what we do with our herding dogs, right? We're communicating with them, and you're both working together for a common goal. And I know people have that same kind of relationship with hunting dogs sometimes and things like that. And I do think it's a thing in human beings that we sort of long for, this animal companionship and working relationship. And I think that's why dog sports are popular now, right? Because people want to experience that, working together relationship. I think that's why people, still ride horses. They want to experience, doing something with the horse, even though it's not necessary for life anymore to survive, right? I've been fascinated lately by all the people getting those little communication buttons with their dogs and cats, right? Where they're teaching them to use the buttons. It's the same thing. I think we kind of long to communicate better with our animals and make sure that they can communicate with us. And herding dogs are just one branch of that, but it's incredible. they come pre-wired to do so many things, although they still need training and guidance and maturity and everything else. But they're invaluable to our lives if you're a person who keeps, an animal that needs to be herded that way.
Yeah, we could talk for hours and hours, it seems, but one thing I just want to touch on is my 100% belief that not only dogs are vastly more intelligent than we understand and we give them credit, but they want to communicate with us, and we just don't have the technology and the metrics to do so, and to gauge their intelligence, and so that we could work with them at a higher level. I think that we'll get there one day. Technology, we've got Neuralink right now, and I think that they're trying to link species together. I've written a comedy bit about the perils of that, coming home and being tired from a crappy day at work and having your dog tell your companion tell you that, oh, I want steak tonight. It's like, oh, did you work for it? Did you go out and get a job and bring home money for it? So it's one of those wild. It is. I love the future is so exciting because we truly have not tapped the potential of what I believe is companionship with animals in this world. So I'm excited about it. But we I could talk for hours about that. So what do pet parents need to know when thinking about getting a herding breed dog?
Oh, they need to understand all those traits that we've just mentioned, right? They're going to be high energy. They're going to be highly intelligent. And not only they're going to want to learn and to do things for you and to do things. And that's what makes them happy. They're also going to be, sometimes people say Velcro, right? They're glued to you because they're that image of that herding dog sitting at the shepherd's feet, looking adoringly right up like, what's next, boss? Right? That is true. And if you don't want a dog that will have those demands, I know when my collie was younger, she needed a couple hours every day of exercise and mental stimulation. She's older. She's about 7 right now. She's our house dog too, but she goes out and does sheep every day, and she has to go check on chickens with us and do different things. But still, at the end of the day, if we have not devoted some time to taking her out for a romp in the pasture or a walk or gone out to chase balls or to do something else, it's bothering her, right? She is like in your face saying, you need to do something with me. I'm kind of like that, child that is full
Right.
of energy.
Right.
And I understand why people love herding dogs because they are super intelligent companions and very devoted, but they also demand something of us as well. And if you're not going to be prepared to meet what they need in their life to make them happy, they're not the right dog for you. There are some dogs that are much more chill, right? And even among the herding dogs, one of the reasons I wrote my latest book, Farm Dogs, I did individual breed profiles on all the livestock guardians and herders and dogs and stuff like that, because you can make a choice within that group. The border collie would be at the top of, a dog that demands a lot from you, but there are herding dogs that are far lower down the line. I mean, we've kept corgis for years, very happy, chill herding dogs, right? You know what I mean? And
so cute.
yeah. And our English Shepherd that we have now, we on purpose did not purchase a border collie this time. We're older, we're retired. Our numbers of animals are more controllable now. We're like, we couldn't provide enough work for a border collie. We could provide enough work for an English Shepherd.
Right.
Right. And that's what I guess I mean about making an intelligent decision within the breed group as well. Same thing with livestock guardians or terriers or anything.
It still cracks me up when I think about corgis herding cows. That just the visual of that. I've actually seen video of it. I don't think I've ever seen it in person. It would scare the hell out of me because you just think, wow, all it takes is one accident there. So tell our audience again about that. In your book, do you rank according to?
Yeah. Well, I take the book Farm Dogs is really about all the breeds that traditionally worked and lived on farms. And they're divided into 4 groups: livestock guardians, herding dogs, working terriers that had a job to do, not, the working terriers. And then finally, that sort of multi-purpose farm dog breeds that can do a little bit of everything, sort of jack of all trades. And then for each breed, I identify their energy level and what their personality traits are like. And I talked to breed people for each one of these breeds about what would you say is a good home for this dog? What's a good fit? Would this one be good with a family? Right? Would this one be okay in the city? Is this one better if the family likes to hike and camp a lot? Right? And so I felt like people make bad decisions all the time about dogs. And I wanted people to have something more to go on than just the description at the American Kennel Club, right? You know what I mean? I wanted them to think about the working natures of the dogs, the behaviors they inherit, their temperament, what it's really like, not the idealized look of Lassie on TV, right? But what it's really like to live with a collie, right? So that was sort of the most important book that I've written for me personally, because I felt like people need to be educated.
It sounds so useful. It should be in every shelter, every veterinary clinic. It should be out there and say that you read this and if some actually it would be great if you could somehow take your personality test and match that personality test with the personality test or the energy level of
The person.
yeah, exactly. Because I can assure you, I mean, like you said, some of those the herding dogs require several hours a day,
Mhm.
or you're both going to be unhappy, the entire family. You also have written about, and you seem to be fascinated in something that I find very interesting: historic breeds. Tell us about your work in historic breeds.
I've long been a member of the Livestock Conservancy, which is a group of people that came together in the 70s as well. It was kind of a change time here in America, where they realized that the historic breeds of livestock and poultry were disappearing in favor of the few sort of favored production breeds of livestock and poultry, that are raised on big farms or whatever. And yet there's this huge diversity out there of, there's like 86 different kinds of sheep in England. Why are there 86 different breeds of sheep? Because they're all slightly different. They're suited to living in a different place. They produce a slightly different wool. Perhaps they're a meat breed. And it's like we were losing all this diversity that was gifted to us by all these people that came before us. I feel like breeds of livestock, poultry, dogs, whatever, they're kind of a gift that the past has handed to us. People that were devoted to them for generations made decisions on, to develop this breed of dog or this breed of cattle or something. And if we just ignore that in the modern world, not only are we losing these genetic packages we may need in the future, because some of them are more resistant to disease. Some of them are better mothers than others. Some of them are better at grazing. A prime example of this was about 15, 20 years ago when suddenly people wanted pasture-raised poultry, right? They didn't want poultry that was raised in big buildings. That's a marketing thing now. Is this pasture raised egg or something? Well, when they took the production breeds of chickens out of those barns and put them in the field, they just like wandered around and died because they didn't know how to look for their own food. They didn't know how to exist outdoors. So we had to turn to those historic breeds that's what they did, right? The same thing has happened in the pork industry. It favors, a couple of production kinds of pigs, but now people are interested in pasture-raised pig, right? Pork. Well, then you need a breed that can survive outside, that won't get sunburned in the sun, that can raise its babies outside without losing all of them, right? It's just a host of things. And it, along with this disease resistance, because when we became too dependent on just one kind of chicken or one kind of turkey, something can hit them and we've lost, right? We've gambled our food source on this. So these people came together who were like a combination of farmers whose families had raised these animals. They were like animal scientists who understood the importance of keeping genetics, and these museum people who run these living history sites like Mount Vernon or Williamsburg or any place, who suddenly couldn't find the authentic animals that used to be at Mount Vernon, right? I mean, George Washington had certain breeds of animals and they wanted to put them back on there. These people came together in the 70s and they've been working seriously since then. And they have saved an enormous amount for us for the future. There's a similar group in England that has done the same thing, because people are actually interested in rare breeds, right? And interested in things like that. So now people that are keeping little backyard flocks of chickens, they're going through the chicken catalogs and picking all these old historic and rare breeds because they thought it'd be fun to have some of all of those, right? So it's been a success story.
Yeah, I lived down Newport, Rhode Island, on and off, and traveled there, stayed there many, many times. And the Campbell Soup family have a
Yep,
wonderful, I'm sure you're familiar, tough.
I've been there.
Yes, unfortunately, it's only open to the public once a year, and I never seem to be there. What is the name of that sanctuary?
Oh geez, I would have to look it up. But
Yes.
she bought this farm.
Hmm.
She invited me actually out to meet with a bunch of other people when they were setting up their genetic preservation program, because they are freezing genetic samples of tons of breeds, and that's sort of her gift to the
Right.
future. This sort of banking of genetics, because you never know when we're going to need this. Oh, it's fascinating and beautiful.
Yeah, it's called, I think it's called locally and colloquially as the Swiss Village, I think is
It
what
was.
it's.
Yeah, it was originally built by some Swiss craftsmen
Right.
who came and built it all out of stone. Oh, I could look it up, but I've been
Yeah,
there.
but
It's fascinating.
it's fascinating. You drive by and it's just this massive open areas with Swiss villa architecture, but you see species of livestock that I've never seen, like the Galloway cow that has a
Mhm.
like a white stripe and it's black, or it's black and a white stripe or something, and it's fascinating. But I've always wanted to go there and tour it, but it's only open to the public one day a year. So is that what you're doing? When I looked
Yes.
at your CV, that was called Conservation of Domestic Animal Diversity. Is that what that is?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
I was worried we were going to be doing gender studies in companion animals or something like that. I was like, Ginger, I don't know how this podcast is going to go. It might fly off the rails, but it's so important, that work, and I don't think that we understand that, is if we put everything, all the eggs in one basket,
Mhm.
literally, and bank on one genetic variety of a food or farm
Mhm.
animal, then we're exposing ourselves to tremendous risk.
Yep.
So we need that diversity in the farm animal world, right?
Same as with plants, right? There are a lot of people trying to save heirloom varieties of all kinds of things, right? Because we need to preserve that diversity for the future.
And people too. We all have a job to do. We all have a purpose to serve, and we all are part of this big, crazy, chaotic thing that we call Earth. So I wanted to talk about a couple of things, but we're already running long. Beekeeping, you're into beekeeping. You're also into organic gardening. Those are all fascinating, great things. I don't know, Ginger, if we could qualify bees as fuzzy, but actually, you probably do have fuzzy butts.
They are fuzzy.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
They are fuzzy. But we're running long, and we could always have you back on the show to talk about whatever you want. It's amazing what you do, and it's fascinating. What? Let's wrap things up. Is there anything that you would like to say to pet parents out there? Any final message that you have for them?
It's just that same message again, to be prepared, right? To respect your animal as a as a unique being that also has needs, right? And has behaviors and a personality and a temperament and everything just like a person. And I get frustrated sometimes with people who call me and say, I need a livestock guardian dog right now. Something's attacking my sheep. And I'm like, it's not a magic tool. It's a living, breathing animal that you have to forge a relationship with, and it takes time. You're not going to take a livestock guardian dog in and home and plug it in. It's going to work. So I guess a whole idea of patience, appreciation for the fact that they all have individual personalities. If you have one livestock guardian dog, the next one may be very different, right? But that's part of the joy of it, right? That every animal that you own and lives with you has a different personality. All my sheep are different. All of our dogs are different, right? And
Absolutely.
appreciating that instead of being frustrated by it, I guess, is what I wish people would be, right?
That's beautifully said. Do you have, Jan? Do you have other books that you would like to mention, or publications
I
that you
think we've talked about, the 4 books that I published about historic breeds of livestock. And I also did a book about livestock guardians, which is about using dogs and llamas and donkeys to protect your animals. I guess I'd really like to send people to my website.
Please, that's the last thing. Yeah, go ahead.
It's jandohner.com. And I'm sure you can put a link or something with it, right?
Absolutely.
I have tried to accumulate all sorts of resources. I have webinars that are free for you to watch that were funded by the Food Animals Concerns Trust to try to help people. I have a lot of other resources. I have a blog that I try to, answer questions and describe things. And I do answer my email. People write me and say, what should I do about this? And I'm happy to talk to them. So
what's your email? Well, first off, let's get the website, and I want to get your spelling correct. It's Jan Dohner DOHNER.com. Is
that's
that right?
jandohner.com.
And what's your email that people, or do you mind if people can email you?
The email is on the website.
On the website.
And
okay.
Yes, feel free to email me. Right.
What about social media? Are you on Twitter, Facebook?
I'm not as much as I use my website as a source to interact with people. So.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for putting up webinars and videos and anything that can help educate pet parents, prospective pet parents, future Fuzzybutts of America, or whatever that is. Thank you, and I love it that you had a grant or you work with some organizations that helped made it possible. So, Jan, thank you for everything you do. You're always welcome back here at Fuzzybutts and Friends. Next time we'll do just an entire show on Great Pyrenees, and we'll just share stories and pictures. And I want to see pictures of, if you had Pyrenees in the 70s, I would love to see those old photographs, because I think that's amazing. So it's such an important part of history for that breed. Ginger, before we go, as we wrap things up now, did I screw anything up or get anything wrong this time? Okay, good. We're moving on. That's good to hear. Glad to hear that.
No, you didn't. But I see. I've been told now I should appreciate Indiana's.
Yeah.
When he wants me to do something.
Well, he has one of those personalities that I love to hate. I love everything about his personality, but I know it's his nature and instinct, and it's kind of like you have to work with that relationship, especially if you have a similar personality. It is an everyday struggle. But it's that great dynamic, and I love my boys, of course, obviously, and Pyrenees as well. All right, so before we go, Ginger, do you and the Puppy Up Foundation have a cancer tip of the week for our audience?
Well, actually, we talk about early warning signs and cancer tips all the time. So I just wanted to let people know that we do have a card that has the 10 early warning signs for canine cancer. We also have a little sheet that tells you exactly how to check your dogs for lumps and bumps, and a drawing of a dog. You could modify it for a cat if you wanted to use that. And you can get that information at, you can email me at info@puppyup.org. And so I just wanted to also go over the 10 warning signs that we have, because we have this little card that we can send out to people. Or if you're a vet clinic that's listening and you want those, just email me again at info@puppyup.org. So you want the 10 early warning signs, and Luke, you can see if you know what they are. So it's lumps and bumps.
I made the list. I think.
yeah, but you know what?
It's been a long time, but go ahead.
So check your dog for lumps and bumps. If there are any lesions that are not healing properly, any lameness, obviously you want to go to your vet. An appetite loss that's not that you can't figure out a reason why your dog is not eating, they need to go to the vet. If your dog is lethargic, and it's typically like that border collie that we're talking about. Now, if it's a Great Pyrenees and it's lethargic, you may have a problem telling whether or not that's what's going on. The weight loss, appetite loss, weight loss. I think I mentioned appetite loss. We have on it a loud odor, which everybody wants to know what a loud odor is, but it's something that's, that's stinky. It's stinky, loud. We tried to do everything with L, so we had a loud odor instead of something stinky. So you want to check that out. If it's an oral, your dog might have a problem with a cancer or an abscess in its mouth. Any loss of a bodily function. If your dog you've noticed your dog's not urinating or going to the bathroom, going poo-poos, as we like to say in my house. You want to take them to the vet. Bloody discharge, whether, if there's a discharge, we you could turn out to be a nasal cancer. So, and a labored breathing. So you never know, labored breathing could be the cause of many, many different things. So for any of those things, and that was long, you should see your veterinarian.
But it's like we talked about this entire episode with Jan, is that the most important thing is know your fuzzy bud. Get to know,
Right.
build a rapport, build a relationship, and they will tell you, hopefully, if you listen and you look and you spend enough time with them, they should communicate with you when they're not feeling good over an extended period of time. So
Right.
loud odor, that's a Texas thing. You smell
my mom used to say, oh, her perfume is loud. So I knew exactly what it is, but I get more questions.
You smell something south of Cheese Down in Texas, and woo, son, that's loud. That's loud.
Yeah,
so that's a Texas saying.
I got lots of questions about that one.
You did run long, but that's a very important list. Everyone go check that at your website. Please go to Jan Dohner's website and watch her videos. And to watch the video of this episode, you can find that on our YouTube channel, which is fuzzybuttsstudios.com, or you can listen to this on your podcast platforms such as iHeartRadio and Spotify. Until next week, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of the show. Puppy up. Talk soon.